Hi, I'm Wei-Chung, and I am an economist by training, but business practitioner by heart.
And I am India Tucker, a designer by trade with a knack for marketing and an entrepreneurial spirit. And this is Crash and Build, the podcast where we talk about crashing old perceptions and building new perspectives in the realms of business, economics, marketing, tech, and more.
Here we introduce you to aha moments that will prompt new ideas. Listen in to stay on pace with our ever-changing world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Crash and Build. I know we've been away for some time, but we're back. So my name is India. I am one of your co-hosts, and I am here with my other co-host, Wei-Chung. And today we're talking about Saas. We're headed to a really cool conference next week, which I'll get into. It's called SaaStr. But first of all, Wei-Chung, how are you doing today? How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. I'm super glad to be back at it, recording another episode with you. Just like you said, I mean, we've been a regular participant for this SaaStr conference. And SaaStr conference, I know that you're about to get into it, but just a little preview. All these software as a service providers will get together and share industry insights. And really happy to see, our friends and colleagues and even our competition in the conference next week in San Mateo, California. And I'm, again, super happy, have been busy recently, but very happy that we get to do this because every time we do this, I feel like it's very therapeutic.
Yeah, me too. I love talking to you. And so if you don't know about SaaS, first of all, if you don't know what SaaS means software as a service. And SaaStr, it's basically all of these SaaS companies from around the country and around the globe getting together in almost like a festival-like experience. There's lots of speeches, there's lots of talks. We get together and there's lots of networking events. So it's really great. And I know everyone that's going is probably really, really excited to be there. So today we're kind of going to break down some new concepts in SaaS. So what has changed over the last year? What has changed since SaaStr 2023? And how has this changed the business landscape for SaaS? What we're crashing is the idea that SaaS business models are infinitely scalable. And what we're trying to build is an understanding that there has been so many innovations and changes in the SaaS business model landscape, and it's going to be forever evolving.
Right. And then with more competition coming in, the business model is being challenged in the SaaS industry. And just to put things in perspective, the number of participants in the SaaS industry has grown tremendously and exponentially in the past years. Right. And just like you said, I mean, people previously believed that this business is infinitely scalable because the marginal cost of producing yet another license to your solution is really small. And which, again, attracts a lot of competition to come into this business. And now we're at the point where, we have been in the SaaS industry for so long, and we've started seeing, the changes. And we've started seeing, there are, bigger players that are emerging, smaller players that are coming into the model that got absorbed. So I'm really interested and excited to talk about all these changes, and some changes are really radical, but I think that the underlying principle is constant. That is, when you have a business opportunity that emerges, it's going to attract competition, and when a competition joins, we're just gonna. I'm not sure whether I'm describing it appropriately. We're just going to revert to the normal, and the normal would be, you have some players that have built entry barriers high enough, and it's going to be particularly interesting in the SaaS model because there is no like tangible products are being provided. So
True.
how do you build the entry barrier? How do the smaller players respond? And how do the businesses that are leveraging those software services change their behaviors? Or does that affect the SaaS industry in general? And these are the things that I'm interested in talking about, not only from the perspective of
Mhm.
economist, but also from the perspective of a participant in a solution provider in the space.
Yeah. It is interesting because like you say, like you said, when you think of SaaS, almost every business they want to have like a SaaS model. Like
Right.
even for me, I know clothing. You never thought clothing could be a SaaS model, but then you see companies like um, Project Runway, or that you can rent out you can sign up for a subscription and have new items delivered to your door every month until you cancel that subscription. So
Right.
it's really interesting how many types of businesses have joined the SaaS model, and I'm also interested in seeing like where is the endpoint, what is going to cut this off and make consumers look at it differently.
I think you hit a very important point, like the Project Runway idea, for example, you just talked about. Like it's a manufacturer, right? It's a producer of clothing items, but it seems like people misbelieve that the SaaS model could be infinitely expanded. Right?
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, Project Runway is not a software as a service provider, but it leverages
Oh,
software, right? It leverages software and try to
yeah,
deliver a service to reinforce its original business model so that it's more sustainable. And
yes.
we have witnessed a lot of similar things that are happening in really market in general. Like Panera Bread has a subscription model, right?
Yeah, you have that subscription.
Correct. And I could argue that it tries to be a software as a service provider. Although
Mhm.
if you really ask them, they will say, no, 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 we're in this coffee and bread business. But it
Right.
still utilizes an in-house software solution and try to build on it so that it could tap into this subscription business model. I
Mhm.
think people have this, I'm trying to break it down, right? So the SaaS
Yeah.
model in general, you have so many ways to charge. And the
Mhm.
subscription model is I think the most popular model that everybody tries to leverage. I
Right.
think at this point it'll be interesting if I tell you kind of like a quick example because I had an opportunity to talk to a venture capitalist,
Mm.
and I was very interested in learning what the current landscape is in the
Mhm.
technology space, from the venture capital perspective.
Right.
And so he started sharing with me the conversations and the interviews that he did with some startups. And I
Mm.
was like, okay, so how do you start a conversation? What is the first question that you ask them? And interestingly enough, he shared with me that the first question is always, how much is your recurring revenue? And I was like, wait a second, recurring revenue. I mean, you don't care about their total
Interesting.
revenue, you only care about their recurring revenue.
Mhm.
And what he said in the following really confirms what my understanding is. So he said to me that he only cares about recurring revenue because he wants to wake up every morning knowing exactly how much he has to eat, that he could eat,
Mm.
right? So
That makes
that's the
sense.
idea,
Yeah.
right? And people paint venture capitalists, with this evil picture. No, they're helping us grow, right? They're helping us participants grow in
Mhm.
the respective ecological system. So I appreciate that perspective. And I think that he has seen enough to confirm that, out of all these players in this marketplace, he has already, come down to a point to recognize that the only important component that could sustain his own business model as a venture capitalist is how much
Mhm.
recurring revenue that the business that he's interested in talking to has. And I think that provides us, the solution providers or the players in the marketplace, a very interesting perspective. Because like I said in the very beginning, I mean, people wanted to come into the SaaS model because they know that the marginal cost of producing additional item is close to zero.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the more licenses that the more subscriptions that you could push out, you get to spread out the fixed cost of your research and development, your distribution, and personnel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that fits the economic principles perfectly. And I think that gets to also explain why a lot of the SaaS companies are now adapting the pricing and revenue models in response to the changing market conditions and customer expectations.
Mm-hmm.
In the space that we are operating in, we have seen people are cutting the price to the bone because all they care about is to get in, right? Once I get into your ecological system, there's a recurring component that I could take advantage of.
Right. It makes sense to cut the price a little bit if you're going to have that recurring annual subscription. And real quickly, before we go any further, Wei-Chung, it's called Rent the Runway, not Project Runway. I do have to make a confirmation there.
Rent the Runway. Yeah, Project Runway. I used to watch that show.
It's a TV show. It's a good show.
Correct.
Yeah.
Rent the Runway. Rent the Runway.
Rent the Runway.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just
right.
had to make
No,
the
all good. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you see, this, nothing is new at this point, right? Because everybody cares about how to generate revenue, and there are multiple ways to generate revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not in the tangible product business, but I think people also misunderstand by thinking that you're in the SaaS business, so you don't have to rely on property, plant, and equipment. But really, I mean, the overhead and the startup cost for any SaaS solutions would probably be as high, if not higher, than the traditional brick and mortar businesses that require a lot of PP&E.
True. Very true.
Right. So there's a lot of risk involved. But I think today I'm really interested in talking about number one, the evolving SaaS model.
Okay.
And I think that needs to be talked about. And I think we want to talk about how AI integration has played a significant role in the current SaaS offerings. And I truly then want to talk about the uncertainty of economic growth in this particular industry. I think there is still a lot of different things going on. I mean, this industry has still a long way to go to reach, I want to say, a steady state. Because there's still a lot of dynamics. A lot of small providers are trying to come into the picture, but it's becoming a bloodbath at this point. I think back in the days, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, I mean, people still saw SaaS industry as kind of like a blue ocean, but right now it's becoming a red ocean. And before I talk about all that, I want to remind everybody, and this is applicable in any business or any industry. People want to come in and take over, right? Whoever it is, if you want to join a market, you are attracted by the revenue position, by the potential revenue position. When you come in and you want to become big, you want to dominate, and you want to kill other competition, right? That's just because firms are being driven by incentives. But I think sooner or later, what you need to, as a participant, you need to realize the role that you need to play. Because not everybody could build their own ecological system. It's like everybody, if you're an animal, you live in a jungle, everybody wants to become the lion because you dictate. But there are other smaller animals that may be at the service of lion, right? Your existence might be to serve the lion, right? And maybe it's a bad analogy, but you kind of get the idea. if you truly care about, if you only want to become the lion, then maybe that'll be an endeavor that'll never materialize.
Mm.
Identify your position. And this is important because I think if you talk about the SaaS business model, I think starting out, all these smaller businesses are trying to identify this standalone functionality
Mm-hmm.
so that they could serve the business. But right now, the needs of businesses are constantly evolving. Some businesses, they have their own ecological system, or they have signed up for, a larger platform. So the question then becomes, if you're a smaller software service provider, is your service integrated, with other platforms? Is the question. First question, right?
Right. That's
Number
big.
two, right? Number two, does your standalone functionality fit my need? Why would I ditch my current service provider to go to you, knowing that there might be flexibility that I'm sacrificing because my current service provider might have already integrated with other services I'm using?
That brings us to like how it's evolved over time, how SaaS has evolved over time is now you have to be ready to have all these different integrations. I mean, I had a call with a client just today, who they're looking at some of our competitors, and our competitors might have certain integrations that we don't. So how, as a SaaS focused business, do you how do you develop so that you can get these partnerships, get these integrations under your belt so you can fit the mold that your consumers need?
So it's going to sound cliche, but it comes down to customer needs.
Mhm.
And when you develop the standalone functionality and you believe that standalone functionality is universally required, which might be true,
Mhm.
but when you talk to the client, and sometimes the client will express concerns, to you that they need A, B, C, and D, right? And you could only fulfill maybe A or B or C, right, as a standalone feature, right? So from the customer perspective, they're not interested in talking to like standalone feature provider that could cover all of their needs. They're interested in signing up for one thing that covers the most features that they're looking for, which goes
Mhm.
back to the ecological system argument. That is, the bigger players will get bigger, and the
Yeah.
smaller players will be running so hard
Mhm.
to try to identify what is the best way to integrate your service with other services and in the most cost effective and efficient way. Because it's just
Yeah.
purely impossible for a small service provider to be integrated with everything. Integration takes cost, which again goes back to the economics of it. How do you determine the marketability,
True.
right? And you have a lot of lions in this industry.
Yeah.
Like every
Yeah.
function, you have a lion. Every ecological system, you have a lion, right? And so, for example, if you're an accountant, QuickBooks is the lion,
Mhm.
right? If you are, if you're using automated CRM system, HubSpot is the lion, right? Zapier is the lion, right?
Mhm.
And how do you work with these lions? And there may be upcoming lions, right? So
Yeah.
so
True.
right off the bat, I mentioned, I mean, the first thing that we want to talk about is the evolving business model. So you start seeing all these smaller service providers that talk about usage based pricing, even freemium
Mhm.
models,
Mhm.
and the shift of it is just amazing, right? Because again, people want to survive. Like, how do I get a share?
Yeah.
And I think my argument is validated by the concentration of of certain services. Like I said, if you want to bookkeep, if you want to manage your accounting better, you gotta consider QuickBooks.
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, I mean, there are alternatives. But if you're the client, if the cost difference between the alternative and the leading solution is just de minimis, what would you do?
Right.
You crowd out the smaller players.
No, I think that kind of gets us into AI, the topic that everybody always want to hear about. So
Yeah.
AI, I mean, AI has been around forever. I think you've said that before on the podcast, but in the last year especially, we've started to see AI in almost everything, right? Every type
Right.
of tech that we've used before in our lives suddenly has something that it relates with AI, or it upgraded itself to work with AI. So from a SaaS perspective, how have SaaS businesses had to adapt to using AI? Has it made them stronger? And has it made the overall experience for the consumer better?
And I've said it a year ago, and I'll say it again. I think AI, there's still a long way to go in the development
Mm-hmm.
of AI. Although I think what AI has done that kind of shocks us is how rapid the developments have been, right? Because usually
Right.
technological advancement takes a long time for like
Mm-hmm.
one generation to be developed, and then maybe more iterations will come in the next 10 to 15 years, right? Think about like how internet has evolved. Like even the most advanced thing like internet and computer, it takes about 2 decades, 1 to 2 decades before we see we can see what the internet is today. AI is different. I mean, you take a look at ChatGPT and Cloud AI, for example. Like every time they update the model, the algorithm, it only take them what, a month or two, right? So it's happening
Yeah.
pretty quick. But
Mm-hmm.
having said all that, I think we still are waiting, at least from the end user perspective, we're still waiting for the more consumer friendly product and service that is based on AI. AI shocked
Mm-hmm.
us when ChatGPT was introduced, and it's fun to use the conversational AI. Right? It's fun. And you'll be amazed by the output and the results. That's all good. But I think at this point, it's still mostly ancillary because majority of the end users don't get to see how AI plays a role to better their life on a daily basis. And it'll happen. Don't get me wrong. It will definitely happen, but we have yet seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, coming back to the SaaS providers, you have a lot of SaaS providers that are trying to integrate AI into their offerings. So what makes most sense? Those SaaS providers that are focusing on data, be that data management, data analytics, it makes sense for them to use AI in their engine, in their back end to help better the user experience. Or if you are a software service providers that focuses on that a lot of your business is related to customer service, using AI makes sense because we have been using AI to deal with customer support, right? So immediately, right off the bat, I have I identified two areas.
Right. Yeah.
But the problem is, how do we then incorporate AI to enhance the functionality and improve the user experience of your current solutions? I think all these SaaS providers are still grappling with how to effectively do that.
Mm-hmm.
Customers, out of curiosity, they always ask me this one question, investors too. So what are you guys doing with AI? Right? And then we kind of internally scratch our head pretty hard and think, all right, so this is what we do. We're going to incorporate AI to do what then, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the solution providers, from my perspective, are incorporating AI for the sake of incorporating AI. Because I think the value
Yeah.
proposition is still not yet established. Again, I'm not saying it in a condescending way. I'm not here to say that it's not going to happen. It might happen overnight. I'm just saying that at the current moment, I have yet seen that personally. Right? Maybe
Yeah.
there are companies that are secretly cooking some functionalities that are must-haves that the customers will definitely. Well, guess what? Right now, from an end user perspective, as an end consumer, Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with paying the $20 monthly subscription to Cloud AI or ChatGPT. I'm fine with that, right? But are there other ways for me to pay for other type of features or other type of functions? I think this is something that the SaaS provider needs to think about. If you're in a data field, if you're in a customer support field, I think that's easy to do. If you're in an analytical field, I think that's easier to do. But then again, do you have the foundation? What's the foundation? The foundation is there are two things: computing power and data.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the insight that I'm providing. That is, you got to think hard. Don't do AI for the sake of doing AI. But I think AI just gives us so much potential to leverage, depending on the service type that you're offering.
Like use it intelligently. Don't just add it into your
Yes.
product because you think it's a buzzword and you need to have it.
And it's nothing wrong to see it as a buzzword, because if it could generate a quick revenue position, why not? Right? Remember
Right.
back in the days when we have, because we're in the software space, so I'm going to talk about the software industry revolution and evolvement. Right? Remember back in the days when it's pay per downloads, like when App Store was first
Yeah.
introduced, there was pay per download, and then when
Mhm.
that was tapped out, what happened? We switch it to the in-app purchase model. Right?
Mhm.
Everybody could download the app for free, and then you just pay for the accessories and the items and the functionalities that you want to have in the app. And when that taps out, what happens? You switch to the subscription model, right?
Yeah.
So again, at the time when people developed the in-app purchase, so many of them are doing it for the sake of doing it. Because it generates quick revenue position that the pay per download model wasn't able to satisfy.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. And to me, it's I don't recommend that providers act out of desperation. You really need to see the big picture. What's the next? Right? What's your next move? Right? Once the quick revenue position exhausts, what happens?
Mhm.
At the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's the functionality. And I wake up every morning. I'm a SaaS provider. I wake up every morning. There are a ton of emails sitting in my inbox wanting to sell me some sort of service. Right?
Yeah.
And be that lead generation, be that data insight, customer support, engineering support, all these services. And majority of them are SaaS providers, just like we are. So now,
Yeah.
if we're talking about the economics of it, then I think a lot of businesses, the B2B SaaS space is a bloodbath at this point. Because all these businesses, especially in the face of economic uncertainty, they're trying to cut down expenses.
Mhm.
So what makes most sense? If your SaaS, if your software service does not provide key functionality that directly connects to the workflow of your client, that helps them generate a revenue generating solution, then you're out, because you'll get cut.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think another helpful perspective would be for you to think about, from the business perspective. If you're doing an inventory check, how many services are you using? And how many of that are essential? Now, this may be a hard question, because organization tends to get big and costs are hidden, right? And I
Mhm.
want everybody listening in to think about this from your own perspective. Are you signed up for Netflix? I am, right? Guilty as charged.
Me too.
Do you have right? Do you have Paramount Plus? Do you have ESPN? Do you have YouTube TV? How about Fubo? How about Hulu? Right? The list goes on and on,
There's a
right?
lot. Spotify. Spotify is a necessity.
It's Right? And
Spotify is like water,
yeah,
right?
and a lot of people would argue that, and they drink all
Mhm.
kinds of different water, right? They drink Spotify,
Oh
they
my
drink
gosh.
Sirius XM, they drink. You see what I
True.
mean now?
Hmm.
And the costs get hidden, but when the tidal wave comes, and by tidal wave I mean the next economic recession, those are the first things to be reviewed or scrutinized, because because the
Yeah,
discretionary expenses will be cut. And
good
then
point.
it goes back to the evolving SaaS business model. It goes back to the AI integration. How do you make your service essential and critical? You got to be able to demonstrate your willingness to serve the lion in the jungle, right? And people don't think about that. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
you don't need to be the lion if you want to survive well, and you prove your worthiness in front of the lion. You could do that too. And in the SaaS business, and that means is your service easily integrated? Is your service critical enough that could provide the value add to the existing ecological system? Are you providing customer support services in a timely fashion? Do you have engineering support not only in the United States but also worldwide? Do you have clientele that comes from everywhere in the world, not just a particular region? Right? Those are the questions that we need to ask.
Right.
Right? So in a sense, we're not talking about just a vertical integration. I mean, sometimes it could be horizontal too,
Hmm.
right? Because there's a train of SaaS industry focusing on certain industries. Um, Maybe that's a wrong perspective. Maybe you need to identify a more universal approach.
I think that was huge.
Yeah,
Um,
I could go ahead, and if I may,
mhm.
analyze a little bit further, because I've been thinking about this every single day, and I think this is so interesting. Because back in the days when we talk about like merger and acquisition, the SaaS industry reminds me a lot of the pharmaceutical industry.
Mm.
Everybody talk about pharmaceutical industry. You don't have to understand the industry to know that there are only a handful of giants in the industry, or the lions in the
Right.
jungle. Right? You have
Right.
GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, you name it, right? All these giants.
Hmm.
You have rarely come across smaller pharmaceutical companies because it's really difficult for them to survive. Reason being that for an effective compound to be successfully developed from an early stage to when it's commercialized successfully, it's a 7 to 10 or 15-year journey. If you're not heavily backed, with capital, it's really hard for you as a small company to storm, to survive
Yeah.
through the storm, right?
Hmm.
So there
Survive
is
through
a
the
lot of
fittest.
exactly. So there is a lot of M&A activities that take place at a very early stage. So you
Hmm.
have smaller pharmaceutical companies. They've developed a compound that may or may not be effective, and then they know that they have no shot if they keep the compound in their hand, and they try to commercialize it, or go through the clinical trial period. They just have no shot because they don't have resources. So normally what they do is that they would try to be merged, or they will try to sell the compound to the
Hmm.
giants. And that's when most of the M&A activities happen. That is at the
Hmm.
early stage. You take a look at today's SaaS landscape. You have a lot of smaller solution providers that want to come in. And if they don't have like good enough revenue position, despite the fact that they might be willing to sacrifice, the upfront revenue by making their solutions free. They don't have enough, recurring revenue position that'll sustain them to survive the initial business development period. Their best way out might be just to, allow somebody else
Right.
to take over.
Right.
I see a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talked a lot about SaaS today.
We do, and quite honestly, there's a lot more to talk about. But I think I don't want to keep boring our audience. I mean, there is a lot of I'm not saying that some of the points that are already that I made are already validated, and I'm not saying that I'm the oracle, right? I don't presume to be a person that knows exactly what's going to happen, right? But at least from where I sit, I'm seeing a lot of challenges, but I'm also seeing a lot of opportunities. As a solution provider, are you willing to take a hard look at what your development path should be? Do you want to be the lion, or are you okay with not being the lion, but just at the service of lion?
Yeah. So SaaStr 2024, we are going to be there again. Kaydan, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn if you are going as well. We'd love to meet with anybody, talk to you.
Of course.
Organize a little conference and learn more from you. I know there's so many cool businesses that attend, so definitely we're excited to be there. Come connect with us. Yeah. And thanks for listening, as always.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and hopefully that we could we'll do this more regularly. Hopefully, we don't have to suffer from for another delayed. And again, thank you very much for tuning in, and reach out to us if you think that we could provide you with any kind of help. And look forward to connecting with you next week when we go to SaaStr.
Crash and Build is hosted by Wei-Chung Wang and co-hosted and produced by India Tucker. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Crash and Build.